Hi, good evening. It's November the 6th, 7 p.m. I'm Christy Boudreau calling to order the Hatfield School Committee and our November business meeting. And just as a reminder, Massachusetts state law, that we are recording tonight's meeting, so I'll make sure that I share that with everyone present. To start our evening off, we open this up to public comment. Is there anyone in our guest audience or anyone online for public comment? I see none. We will move on. And as we like to start with a mission moments, any examples of how our district brings our mission alive? Some exciting thing to share? Any stories?
So in our family handbook, we have added this year a tiered support for helping families ensure that students are here on time. And I have to say that we are finding success with some of that implementation, and today was a good day for that.
Yay. More on time.
Yes.
Excellent.
From last week, I was honored to hand out the John and Abigail Adams scholarships to 5 of our graduating seniors this year who earned that honor. So it's always one of the highlights of the year to be able to do that, and it was no different last week.
Awesome. That's a high achievement to make. Is there any other mission moments anyone would like to share? While not particular to our mission, it was sort of joyful. I had a chance to be in the building for Halloween at HES, and there was a lot of joy. So that was quite fun. Is there anything that needs to come off the consent agenda?
I only want to say that the minutes are from 2023.
There were a few typos in the minutes. So perhaps we can pass them through with the understanding that we will review them for typos, for dates and names particularly. Okay, is there a student representative report this evening?
There is not. I asked her today and she wasn't sure she had a ride.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Our first item of business is a quick discussion on school choice. As everyone is probably familiar with policy JFBB on school choice, we do not take applications for the current school year after October 1st. That's the day that the state determines the first portion of the year and funding. However, we are also very conscientious that we're making sure we welcome new families into our district. And my understanding is we have had some late applications. And so Mr. Wood and I thought it would be prudent to bring it to the committee to have a discussion about the potential of adding additional students.
Yeah, we have a family of 4 who are interested. And I believe they did another tour today, or we had another tour today of a parent. The family of 4 have done their tour. And I believe we have, unless this is the same one, we have 2 others who have expressed interest, and actually one of those has put in papers. So it's a possibility of 7 new families with 7 new students that just literally out of the blue have come about.
I know some of those families have ties to the town, which is a good thing because that probably would add some stability. Just to clarify, in any of those cases, would any of those students require the school district to add any cost to what we're doing?
Well, I don't have their full academic plan in front of me. It's very possible because we can't screen for educational costs.
They would potentially bring some cost in with them come March for that.
They would be part of our count, so we would get in queue for reimbursement. Yes.
But we would not be adding any additional staff to be able, because they would fall within the numbers we allotted for last spring.
Certainly for general education, that is correct.
Okay.
We have plenty of room.
Okay. I know there's probably a broad misconception. I don't know how broad it is. There is some misconception in some pockets of town that when we add school choice students, we're adding cost to town. And that's in general untrue because we have a fixed overhead and their incoming tuition costs just help us cover those fixed
Correct.
costs. And when there are other costs, we typically get reimbursed for those.
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Right, like every year we approve the numbers per class so that we don't overflow into
Correct.
adding new staff.
Or making our head count unwieldy in any given classroom.
Right.
Thoughts from the committee?
Just to be clear, that the school choice stipend that would come with them would not impact positively until FY26, right?
FY20.
A portion of it would be accounted for in FY '25.
Yeah?
Yes,
Because they look again at the numbers in March.
March,
Okay.
a portion of it, not the full amount.
The other theory being that
It's a long-term investment.
it's a long-term investment. If they come, they're likely to stay. If we say apply next year, the chances they find another district and they stay wherever they find.
Right. Adding in other people doesn't add cost in general. And
Right.
down the road, more money will flow.
Mhm.
And they haven't been here for the entirety of the school year.
Correct.
Do we know grade levels?
There's a span, I know there's a kindergarten, grade 1, grade 4, grade 5, grade 7.
I believe grade 7, and we've also had, in between last week and this week, 2 students in the high school, both 9th graders who are interested. Well, one would be in 9th grade next year, so I guess 8th grade. And one current 9th grader would be interested in coming to.
Can you refresh my memory? What's our current kindergarten enrollment? I thought we were pretty big in kindergarten.
31.
31 between both classes, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, do we know, are there any other local districts to us that are still taking, still accepting school choice?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we were unique to have it the way we have had it, but I don't know the answer.
We're also not unique in looking for increased enrollment.
I think if we have room, we should take people who apply. We're not in a position to be turning people away. As we know from our counts, I think we should take anybody that wants to come and that is interested in us and hopefully stays with us.
So the path forward to do that, as I understand it, would be to offer a waiver of policy JFBB on school choice because it specifies the date. So we would need to make an exception for that, but that is within our discretion to do. Other thoughts?
And we have, can you just, I know that you just said it, but just clarify. So how many, so we have one actual submitted, completed application?
Yes.
And the other ones,
Is that
the other
one or
interested
two?
parties have just called and inquired, or they've done tours, or where are they in that process?
I know we have had tours of at least, for 4 students, we've had tours. Did you have an additional one that did a tour?
Today.
Today we had one here at Smith. But
Not at the elementary.
Okay, so. And there's no guarantee any of them. Even.
How was it
They
left
do
with
fine.
these families that they would be contacted after tonight's meeting?
Yes.
So some of the applications may be pending hearing whether we change the rule.
Right.
And are we looking to, is the vote tonight to extend the date or just to provide like a waiver for this school year? How does it?
That's what we need to decide.
Right, because for me, it's a difference, like, if we're opening specific spots in specific grades, or like, yeah, we're just gonna extend the deadline until, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, we did set a specific number of spots. I guess
Previously, right?
previously, in my mind, that would
If that still
hold
stands.
The only small caveat being would be with if there was a family of 4 and they had one of the 4 that, and the only class that I think even could possibly be an issue is kindergarten. And, would we say we would have 15 and 16 kids in classrooms in kindergarten instead of 15? But I thought we'd lost a kindergartner along the path from that number, but maybe not. No.
Not this year, no.
Okay. So we would be, the caveat on that would
Kindergarten.
potentially being over 1 in kindergarten,
But it's a sibling.
but it's a sibling where we would have potentially given some preference anyway.
Legally, we have
Indeed.
to. If we open spots.
So we can extend it for a period of time. We can keep the number of seats. We can change the number of seats. We can speak to everyone that's come in thus far. We can speak to the people who have applied and do it on a month-by-month basis. It's our flexibility to do that. I would be inclined to want to try and set something that we didn't have to come back over and over,
Right.
so that there was a pretty general rule to follow, just to give administration clear direction.
Well, for potential vote tonight, what if we extended the deadline to the end of the calendar year?
While keeping the cap.
Keeping the
And
count,
keeping the count,
Mhm.
as long as there's room available.
adding one,
But adding a
We'd have to add
potential
one
seat for
seat.
sibling in kindergarten.
right?
I'm not hearing much at the end of the table. I'm kind of checking in there.
I feel like it's a little bit hard to have a full discussion about it, seeing that we
Don't really know.
don't really know, like we have one application and so I feel like
Yeah, that is difficult anytime. I can think of like years ago when this came before the committee, before it was very specific. Like this many seats for this applications.
I will
in.
say when we added it to the agenda,
Yeah,
we had one family of 4 who had come forward.
I see.
So, and that window of time, this subject has evolved,
More people.
which is why it's sort of
Not a
like,
bad thing, but
how do we
right.
look at it holistically? Because I certainly don't want to change whatever the guideline is. It's like if we say yes to 1, how do we not apply that same,
Right.
whatever the rule is, to everyone else?
in the current application that we have is for what grade?
9th grade.
What is it?
9th grade.
9th.
Wait, so just that plus the 4?
That's the only one that apparently the family of 4 the paperwork isn't in.
They haven't actually applied.
Okay.
They've been in touch.
They've called, they've toured, they've talked.
I just did a quick search for Frontier in Amherst, and I didn't see an indication that they had timelines on theirs, that it was just the number of slots and their vote to withdraw those number of slots.
So there are districts that are open.
It would appear so, unless
Yeah.
they have voted to withdraw their slot. That's what it looks like, is that they reach a vote to then pull their slots at some point. So it would have to be, it would be based on their school committee decisions.
Right.
That's how they go about it in those districts.
And I mean, this is a policy that's probably going to be coming back around because it's been a while.
It's on our list.
Yeah.
Yes.
But given the interest, we wanted to get back to these families.
I also feel that we kind of owe it to the town. I mean, we made some promises about increasing our enrollment, and it would not feel right to me to turn away anybody because of a deadline. That would feel disingenuous to me to say that to the town, to say that to people, since we made a big push that we were going to increase our enrollment.
And particularly when we have room.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to continue talking about this? We want to put it to a vote?
I'm sorry, can you just clarify one more time the additional cost conversation? With those with those,
There is a small unknown. So if there are additional needs for these students, which we do not ask, like that's not,
Would never
we would
ask.
never ask. That's not part of the process. We take you or we don't take you. If there were additional costs that we could not cover with our existing staff, then there would be a window of time until that was reimbursed.
and that window of time would be till when?
We'll get a portion of it back in FY '25. And then if they continue with us, we'll see the full
Okay.
into the
assessment,
next.
school choice assessment in FY '26.
If I'm understanding, most of that is just dependent on if we didn't have existing staff. And as I look at our staffing, we have a
Imagine we
lot
have-
of roles covered
Yes.
on staff.
Right, again, general
So-
education, not one iota of cost. This is the unknown of any kind of interventionist costs or special education costs that might be unique to an individual student's plan if they had one.
And in general, for special needs, we're pretty well covered in what
Right,
most
we
kids
already
would
have
require.
quite-
It
we
would just be
already-
But, right,
it
so
would be an exceptional situation if we
Right,
didn't have
if it was
that covered.
specific to that child.
But-
But in general, we have space in our special education programming.
Right.
right.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, it doesn't mean that we don't already have special education costs covered in our overhead. Much of that we would.
Right.
So we're
Probably
talking
would.
about some pretty specific,
Right.
less likely kind of needs.
Right. But generally speaking,
There's no additional
There's-
cost to us.
because we have space in our classes, we
Mhm,
have ample staff.
correct.
And school choice will still reimburse us.
For a
in
portion
March.
of the year in
For-
March, yeah.
It's a partial year, we'll get a partial reimbursement.
So you get like a kind of like a half payment-ish.
Ish, yes.
And then they become part of the roster going forward.
Right.
Okay. Other clarifications?
I'd make the motion, but I think the question also is extending a timeline or waiving it.
So if we were to extend the timeline, like you had given the example of the end of the calendar year, we would say that we will extend our school choice timeline to accept applications like on a rolling basis according to, or are we making people wait until the end of the year? Because if they're applying,
No.
I assume they want to start
Right.
now, right? So it
We would
be like
accept applications
accept
until-
applications on a rolling basis according to the numbers that we voted on
Right.
previously, our capacity numbers
Capacity numbers.
previously, and make
We
possibly
we
one.
could choose not to have it, like, we could just
Right.
make the stop, the capacity number.
Right.
And marry up to some other districts that don't have deadlines at all to it. They just have a number to it.
Right.
Or we could tag it to the March
March 1.
timeline,
Right.
because that's the next check-in point for DESI's funding.
Right.
I mean, there's a little part of me, it's like the difference between November and the end of the year.
Totally.
Right.
I mean, I feel like the issue is not adding past what we have capacity for.
Right.
The dates feel less important to me, but that's just me.
I think that'd be a more comfortable solution than going all the way to the end of the school year for sure. Just go to, applications through December 31st. And
And so,
My suggestion with a date is consideration for teachers who,
Want to form a classroom bond,
Yeah.
want to form a community.
accepting somebody in
People can't move at any time, but
March. You're right, people can move at any
Right.
time, but if we have a rolling
yeah.
thing that people can join at any time, it might be more difficult
It's
for
fair.
the educators to keep accepting somebody new one a
And-
month or
And
whatever.
so educators, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I don't see that being a big hurdle for
No.
them. I think, they're used to students who, as you said, I think more common than school choice has been people moving in or moving out. And they've been used to that for a long time.
Okay.
And I think it'd be different if we were seeing, entire classrooms of students moving in or out, but we're looking at a few students across different classes, which would be similar to someone moving into that class.
Okay.
Do we know if any of these families or students applied already, or are these brand new?
No.
To my knowledge, they're all new. Do you know differently?
One of the families, I believe, had moved to out of state and was interested in school choicing from out of state, and has since moved back into the state. And they had moved out of state prior to the deadline, so they weren't able to. We can't do interstate school choice, but since have moved back into Massachusetts, and are still interested.
Delightful.
What would make Adam and Jen comfortable in a motion?
I think I'm comfortable.
With a deadline or just a capacity?
But sticking to the capacities that we've already set, though that does leave the exception of kindergarten because the capacity we set was 30 and we're at 30 based on our last meeting.
Right.
I would think you'd have to make your motion to say at capacity unless a sibling is part of the family.
And that would put us at 22 in town and 9 choice in kindergarten.
That's
Which is
not a
still-
bad, that's still
That's a good mix.
a
Yeah.
reasonable split considering
Yeah.
where other
Right.
classrooms are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Is there a motion?
All right, I'll make a motion to waive the deadline in policy JFBB and accept school of choice applicants based on the capacity we've previously stated, allowing for the acceptance of siblings.
Is there a second?
Can we just make it on a rolling basis? Like, we're not holding applications and then doing a thing, right? We're going to accept them as they come in?
Yeah.
Okay.
On a rolling basis.
And I
So
second
we're
it.
going to waive the deadline of JFBB to accept applicants on a rolling basis based on capacity, allowing for capacity of siblings when warranted. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? That's a 5-0 vote. Thank you. Okay.
Taking a stab at that motion, Kathy.
I know, that was a little
We got
complicated.
to leave that one to the
I'm waiting
veteran.
for the motion queen to go for it.
So good teamwork. Okay, so moving on to our deep dive assessment, which we originally called out as the data dashboard. And I have given the committee a copy of the questions that we assembled, just so everybody had a reference of that. And we will turn it over to administration to present.
Great. Dive in.
To dive to the data?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Excuse me.
Can you see it all?
We do.
Is it on yours, John? Yep. So thank you. This is
I think you might want to go to the presentation mode so that it's a little easier to see.
I could only find it.
Just click on slide. Yeah, click right there.
Thank you.
So this is obviously a topic that is critical to what we do as educators. We need to do assessment and ongoing assessments to inform instruction at all times. Wrapped into this conversation tonight and this deep dive is our performance on the recent MCAS, which families received this performance of their students, individual students, as well as on our school profile, district profile. All of our MCAS data for spring 2023 is there. And so if you, and we'll post this deep dive as well. So these are the links. I'm not going to go in depth in it. To suffice it to say that we're pleased with our results in the sense that we're seeing the growth that we need. We're coming out of COVID, just like every other district in the state. We're not where we were before COVID, but we're moving in the trajectory we want to move in terms of all of our grades. There are a couple of places where we need to pay attention to in more depth, and we're doing that with not only this data, which is really informing us about our curriculum and how we're teaching it, but also as we talk about individual schools' data in terms of their assessment plan, we're looking at reading and writing and mathematics in across the board. But I think that our value here is to be able to say that we're continuing to work at it, and we're developing the curriculum that we need to have to support our teachers, along with the professional development for the training for them. And that PD is critical, both finding the time for it and making sure that it's what I would say on demand, that is when the teachers need it, we're able to give it to them, but also to make sure that it's aligned very closely to what it is we're supposed to be teaching our students. And that's the curriculum piece that's so critical. This type of information is really part of our data dashboard in the sense that MCAS is a critical piece. And we certainly want parents to be able to look at it and know about it so that when they talk to their child's teachers, they can ask questions that are informed based on what they're seeing, not only their child's scores, but also our school scores and our district scores. In this case, they're the same because we only have one school at each grade level, but also how the state is doing. And they can also take a look at other districts as well. This is all public information and school profile information that they can look at. I'm gonna try to go reverse, but I don't see my reverse key. How do I get out of my link?
We'll say, way to go, fourth grade language arts.
Minimize the tab. I think it's open in a tab that you can't see.
Gotcha. No, that didn't do it.
All you cheaters with your computers.
Just show it. So it's that one right there.
How are you seeing that without being in that meeting? Why don't you just
There we go. Thank you. So to go into a little more depth, each of the principals is going to talk about their individual scores as well for their schools. So we'll turn it over to.
So yeah, I'll talk about as Michael said, we're start with MCAS because that's kind of the forward-facing data that everyone sees and gets, and there's some information we can get from it. So if you take a look, we're going to start with grade 10. This is this is an important year because it's also the competency determination. So grade 10 performance is on MCAS is a criteria for meeting the graduation requirements in Massachusetts. As you can see, our 10th grade English data looks pretty good. We have over an 80% meeting expectations, rate of meeting expectations is significantly higher than the state average. We can go, we can take a look at the math next. And math, we see similar performance. In addition to over 80% of, in addition to over 60%, 70% of the district meeting or exceeding expectations, we had no students who were not meeting expectations in the 10th grade, which is great. And the way the scores work out, even though we had a very small percentage of students who were not meeting expectations in English language arts, their score was still above the threshold of the graduation rate. So all students met the competency determination, which is nice.
Can I just,
Mhm.
so the way 10th grade MCAS works, it's based on like a raw score for graduation. It's not based on,
It is.
okay. Thank you for
And
clarifying.
they have shifted recently and how they're, what scores fall into which category. So it required a little clarity on my part. I had to get in touch with the state to figure out exactly where that landed, but all students are on track from
Wonderful.
that took it last year.
So being a partially meeting expectations, you're still
Yep,
there.
you're
Even not meeting. perhaps.
yeah for
Some
there's like
kids.
two or three
Little wiggle room.
teeny little room there.
Got it.
If we go to 9th grade, the science, technology, and engineering, so the competency determination for science is given in 9th grade, that MCAS. And as you can see, we had pretty high performance again in 9th grade biology. And again, all students met that requirement. After, in a little bit, we'll talk about how we use some of the data that we can dive deeper into to actually make kind of curriculum decisions too. But this is just an overview.
So for 3 through 8, you can see that we still were a little bit slightly higher than the district, than the state. I have to do a shout out to the 3rd grade because they had a 60% of their students met or exceeded expectations for ELA. So that's a nice trajectory to happen. In math, we were about even, a little bit less than the state. And in all truthfulness, the fact that we have started a brand new math program, research has basically shown that it takes about 3 years for consistent implementation with fidelity before we're going to start noticing any type of major changes in our math scores. But I am confident that we will get those scores much higher.
And so as we're looking at this, okay, so that kind of forward-facing data that you can click on and see is all well and good, but it doesn't really give us much detail, right? You see that and you see, okay, this is this group of students' performance on this particular day in ELA or in math, and that's a pretty big that's a whole subject. And so the way that we can use those data then is to take a look at performance, kind of not just on the tests, but on in specific standards and even on specific items to look for trends. So it's a process that takes quite a while, and we'll be spending much of the day on that at the high school tomorrow doing this work. But just as and I picked on 10th grade English because their performance was really high, right? And so the way that you can take a look at this and say, okay, you break down kind of the item analysis of the test. If you take a look at this slide here, you see, okay, here are, despite being really kind of high performing in this grade, we have, these 3 particular questions were the ones that jumped out. They were the ones that we were below the state average on, and in some cases significantly below. So as you look at these, kind of on the left side, you see what is being assessed in each of these questions. So determine the impact of a character's feelings on their identity in a poem. Analyze how the second stanza of a poem relates to ideas established in the first stanza. Analyze details to determine the author's point of view in a poem and select evidence for support. So as you look at those areas, we can say, okay, perhaps poetry is something that was not really harped on, or wasn't really, wasn't a real kind of pivotal part of the curriculum. And maybe if we look vertically, we see that, oh, maybe that's a thing that's lacking, not just in one grade, but kind of up through. I can tell you, as an former English teacher, poetry is one of the things that was often sidelined a little bit. And so if that's the case, we can take a look in specific classes, but also vertically at our curriculum and say, okay, we see persistent, and it goes both ways. We can see persistent strengths across grades in certain areas. And okay, we don't have to necessarily focus our PD on those kinds of things if we're really strong in that. And if we see persistent areas where we have some growth, we can say, okay, here's some area that we, as a department, may want to focus on in the coming years. And that's kind of how we can take these data and kind of go a little deeper with MCAS, keeping in mind, of course, that as an assessment, it gives us kind of a snapshot. This isn't like it gives us a quick snapshot of how a class or a grade or a school was doing at that particular time.
And we have a tool called Edwin Analysis that allows us to go and take a look at several slices of how students perform in terms of the MCAS. And we also have a tool called EWIS that allows us to track students to better understand if there's any kind of pattern of failure that we want to really bring to our BSTs in each of the buildings, and have conversations about whether or not there's some other interventions that may need to come into play for individual students. So we have a myriad of ways to look at the data, not just the face value of it. And so that makes it much more helpful to us when we're trying to plan instruction.
And just also add one quick thing. This item analysis can be done at the elementary school as well. We would just simply use it as a staff meeting, but rather than go through a separate slide, it just in time. So iReady math assessment. So the iReady math assessment, this is the second year in a row that we've been starting this. And this is we're just a quick comparison slide of the overall placement from the fall of last year when we first began this program to the fall of this year. And as you can see, there is at least a slight increase in the amount of students in their overall placement who are meeting or above grade level. And we are shrinking the amount of students that are 3 or more grade levels below.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure can.
So if we're talking about, let's say, fourth graders, when they test, are they getting tested? So if they score in the green where they're at or above grade level,
Yep.
is that I'm taking this in October and I'm where a fourth grader should be in October, or I'm where a fourth grader is expected to finish the year? Like what is the expectation for meets grade level in a fall test?
At the end of the year.
So if you're in the green,
Yep.
You're testing in October where we expect you to be in May or June.
Yes, but the test will, because this is nationally normed to all thousands of fourth graders, any other student who is also at or above grade level at that point still has a typical and an ambitious growth target. So there is still an expectation that students are still moving and growing.
Right. I think my point in calling that out is when we have a large block of yellow, which is
Right.
they're not at grade level, like
Correct.
why would you?
By
They
2 months.
really wouldn't expect you to be at grade level when you
Correct.
start the grade. We expect you to end at grade level at a minimum when you end the grade.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
that's
Got
the
it.
part I'm clarifying for anyone who comes along and looks at this like I did and
I
went,
needed that. I needed
Oh.
that too.
Right. So that yellow means that, initially, and in all truthfulness, when we started thinking about intervention, math intervention in particular last year, we began targeting those students in the yellow because we felt like they're really close to grade level. Let's get them 6 to 8 weeks so we can hurry up and bump them up. But when we contacted and was speaking with curriculum associates, they said, no, actually, you need to be targeting the kids in the red. The kids in the yellow are exactly where they kind of need to be and are when they get solid tier 1 instruction in their math class every day by their teacher. They should be making that adequate progress. So we were like, oh, then we will shift that. And that's exactly what we did.
and we're also able to identify everybody who's sitting in the green who's going to need a little oomph
Yes,
because otherwise they're going to be sitting there bored,
correct.
which
Yep.
is not good for anyone.
Nope. So we have ways to make sure that we can meet them where they're at.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So then this is the similar data for math at Smith Academy. So you can see this is last year in the spring compared to this year in the fall. I will say with as an asterisk, there was some confusion in the spring about how the test was supposed to be given out. So there may have been a slight skewing of some of those data.
Are these the same students? Because it's
Some
everybody.
of them are the same, some of them are not. So that's a really important question. So we give this up to 10th grade. So some of the students who took it as 10th graders did not take it as 11th graders. Some of the students who were not at Smith Academy in last year that came in took it this year. So it's not quite an apples to apples comparison. But it gives us a snapshot of where students are at the beginning of the year. And as you can see, it's we have a significant number in the green, and then we have students who we can identify in the red and yellow as well.
But we would expect more of them
We
to
would.
be in the green
We
in
would.
the spring because they've
Absolutely.
had a year's
Yep.
worth of
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's this is kind of typical.
Ms.
Um,
Petra, I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead. Do you retest in the spring in the elementary school as well?
We do it actually 3 times. We'll do it in the winter as well,
Okay.
and then we do it in the spring. Yes.
I was basically going to ask Mr. Driscoll the same thing. Are we going forward? Are we giving iReady in the fall
Yes.
or only, or do we do
Oh
it
no, we're giving the
multiple?
fall, winter, and spring. So it's a 3
So
time.
same,
Yes.
Yeah.
same plan.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, we were delayed in rolling it out last year. That's the only reason we didn't have
Got it.
winter to spring comparison.
Oh, that's great.
How long does the assessment take?
That
Like,
was right where I was at.
It's
3 times a year.
Timely. So anywhere from 45 to an hour and a half, depending upon the student. In the younger grades, what we were doing we were having some difficulties with ensuring that we had devices. So we had asked the 5th and 6th graders to come down to support the kindergartners and first grades with getting on and understanding the different tools to them. But they were doing it over the course of at least 2 or 3 days. So there's a window that the iReady diagnostic is given, and that same thing happens again in the winter and in the spring. And that's purposeful because it does take anywhere from the grade from 45 minutes to an hour and a half or even longer, depending upon the amount of time the kids are attending to it.
Yeah, at Smith Academy, we give it typically, at least we start it because you can take it over time. We start it during X block, so it's not cutting into instructional time, and we vary which X block is giving which one. So it's not only X1 or X2 that gets hit.
So would we currently be following if a student is testing in the red, that would be tier 3 support, and if students are testing in the yellow, that would be your tier 2 support?
No. It would be a tier 1 in the yellow. It would be tier 2 or possibly tier 3 in the red. It's possible that the teacher themselves could be supporting the student in the classroom, and or they would be being pulled for math intervention. And that's generally a tier 2. It's not tier 2.
And curriculum associates is who is supporting the work in district?
That's the iReady. Yes, iReady is curriculum associates.
And you're saying that they said did they recommend that tiered system of support?
They recommended when we were thinking about how the students that should be targeted for intervention, they were the ones that recommended that we not focus on the yellow, but we focused on the red.
And is that district specific?
We're doing it as that way, yes.
But that sounds like that would be their advice to
Yeah,
every
that would be-
district
yeah,
based on the idea.
It's not, that's not.
I don't think that's what it says on their website, but
We typically wouldn't jump to tier 3. We would try tier 2 first, and then make a decision from there on their performance in tier 2 and for anything.
Because it really matters what in totality they're what concepts they don't have. So if there are concepts that haven't been taught yet, or there are concepts that the teacher may feel they can readily address inside the classroom, then that's how they're going to approach, which would be tier 2. If there are concepts that are more structural and hit more in a prior year, maybe they may say that's something that needs to be in a small group with another teacher in another setting. Because it also depends on how the child learns best.
In going back to the slide here, and I misspoke before slightly. I was a little confused, but this is on this slide is where you see that kind of confusion piece that I was talking about. If you look at the Smith Academy Winter 2023 data, that was from last year. That was the first time we gave it because we didn't have it in the fall. And as you can see, only 52 of 92 students took it. So it's a much smaller sample size. We didn't quite capture everyone there. So that's why that's in quotes up there. But the previous slide, slide 9, is a more accurate representation of all the students taking it. And then we can go to ELA. You can see how the data is broken down there as well. So from the spring of last year to the fall of this year.
They actually retained pretty well in that. It looks like there wasn't much of a drop off.
Yep. And then the next slide is a further breakdown of skills. So this is again where we kind of, again, you see that overall data. It shows you kind of the percentage of students who are performing well in ELA or well in math or in the yellow or the red. But if we look at this one here, we can see again where those strands are that the assessment is really zeroing in on. So in this case for math, we see number and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. 9th grade math is geometry, so you would expect to see a bigger group of yellow and red in that particular one. What's really nice about this though, we didn't have the full breakdown of how you can do this here, is teachers can go into their individual students and see where each individual student is performing on each of these strands, and then access specific kind of lesson ideas that can help target that student specifically. And that's for students who are, high performers or need a little boost. So I can, if I have Connor in my class, I can say, okay, I'm gonna see where Connor is here. Oh, I see he needs a lot of support in algebra and algebraic thinking, which would not be a lie. So then I could say, okay, specifically, here's where he is now. And I have these other 3 students in the class, or these other 4 students who also have the same kind of profile, a similar profile. So I can pull them. I can say, hey, you 4, we're going to meet every Tuesday and we're going to just work on this stuff. We're going to, it can have an after school group or a group that comes and accesses that extra support, even in class. Tonight, this is your homework. We're not going to do the other kind of homework. This is what I want you working on to practice, sort of stuff.
So how do teachers access that individual data?
Through the website. They have access to the data through iReady, and they can go and they can see their rosters. So when they log in the same way a student logs in, their kind of interface is their students. So they see their class, they see their students' performance, and they can go into each one.
Okay.
And we spend part of the day. So tomorrow is our data day is, again, part of it's looking at MCAS data, looking at curriculum, looking at trends. The other part of it is looking at students. And this is where some of that student-specific data you can really use that to drive what you're going to be doing in the classroom.
So somebody's looking at data student-wide for their specific class. At Smith Academy, is someone looking at student data, student-specific across all classes?
They could. Again, this assessment's only for ELA and math, but we have, when we do this kind of breakout, we often pair math and science together and ELA and social studies together, so that if in ELA they're looking, they see persistent persistent read in identifying main idea in nonfiction text. Well, you know, you can,
Carry
that can go
over.
science, that can go math, that can go English, that can go everywhere.
Is it kind of a two-part question? Is it easier for our schools, I guess, because of their size, to do that personalization of the education based on the results? And is there any accountability to make sure that the teachers are personalizing the results on your part, I guess, as their administrator, to make sure that they're doing that for, you know, students on all ends of the spectrum, whether red, yellow, green, whatever?
Yeah, and so the first part of your question is yes, I think it is because we're a smaller group. You know, if you have a class of 15 students and you have 5 of them who are in the same boat, you know, it's much easier to kind of target that. Whenever you have smaller numbers, it's easier to zero in on the what I would call the crack slippers. Those who might otherwise slip through the cracks, they just can't. There's a tighter net. And so this is one of the ways we identify them and say, okay, this is, you know, and this is how I'm going to support those students. Part of what we do when we have data meetings is to look at plans and kind of commit to helping to support those students. And that comes out in the accountability piece comes out in observations. So when I observe, one of the things I look for is how the work is being differentiated, how it's, you know, if there are students who because we know them, we know our students. If there are students who we know are struggling in these certain areas, they have been identified during data meetings. And quite honestly, I've never, you know, in the data meetings that I've had, I've never had someone be surprised by a student who is, you know, having some challenges. Typically, the teachers say, "Yep," and here's what I'm already doing. And, oh, this is a great idea that, you know, this is a great way that we can support that ideas through iReady. But, you know, sometimes it's gone the other way where, yeah, that this student, I'm really not concerned about them. And then we find out that they just rushed through the test and didn't take it seriously. But that comes out, the accountability piece comes out through observations. Yeah. And through continued look at looking at the data. So this is taken in fall, winter, and spring. So if there's a plan in place to support some students that, you know, through the fall, winter, and spring, they're not making progress, then okay, why is that? What's either happening or not happening that's preventing them from making that progress? And that, you know, again, that comes out to, here's what the data says, here's what it means for instruction, here's how I'm gonna implement that in the classroom.
Does iReady give a classroom overview view so that you can
It does.
see
Yes,
Yep.
this group is collectively missing?
yes.
Okay.
And not
That's
only,
what this is. So
Okay.
this is for the 9th grade math. So it's not broken down by, you know, section, you know, A period class and B period class, but this is all the 9th grade geometry students.
another view that the teachers see when they log into their group is they see the roster, and then across those 4 domains, they see, you know, John Doe is green, green, yellow, red, and Susie Q is yellow, yellow, red, green. Under algebra or number, and it's not just color coded at that point, then it gives us a grade level. So say they're a 4th grader, a yellow might say mid 3rd grade or emerging it'll say the grade that they're placed in, not just the color coding. Because to your point, Jen, talking about what tier, red may be 2 grade levels behind or 6 grade levels behind red, you know, so that part is important for us to know. And we may go about that differently depending on the overall look.
But yes, classroom teachers do have a whole class overview.
That you guys review as well, I see.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And even the progress that the students are making when they're actually going in and doing their iReady practice, the teachers can actually see that as well. So that'll come up as a percentage of the amount of times they're on doing their minutes, as well as the lessons that they've created, that they completed, and the percentage of accuracy for that. So all of that data is available to the teachers.
Thank you.
So the 3-level versus the 5-level analysis. So When iReady first started, they used 3 color coding. It was the green, the yellow, and the red. And that was great, except that unfortunately it also said, well, how close is my kid to being, and if they're in the green, are they really high in green? And if they're in the red and they're below grade level, how far below are they? So to answer that question that educators were providing them, they switched their scale from a 3-point scale to a 5-point scale. So we're using the 5-point scale because in this example here, this is one of our first grade classrooms. If you looked at it as a 3-point scale, everything is green and yellow until you look at it as a 5, and then the breakdown is very different. So we have our math interventionists supporting students in first grade based on the fact that we see so many of our students are struggling with measurement and geometry. So we want to make sure that they're being targeted for that because that is such a significant gap in their learning. So this is, again, part of that, that we are reaching for excellence is ensuring that we are setting a bar high and that we're targeting students, or more specifically, we're giving and providing intervention when there is a need. So that's the difference between the 3 level and the 5 level. DRA results. So here's just a quick kind of overview. The DRA is a developmental reading assessment. We utilize this as one of our assessment tools in targeting both intervention as well as where students are reading when it comes to small group instruction. So this is just a quick breakdown of kindergarten through grade 6. Grade 6 last year, we did utilize iReady ELA. Connor is using it at the middle school, high school. Our middle school, our 6th grade teachers were feeling like they wanted to also use a bit more what the middle school model was doing. So we implemented the iReady in January last year and have started the school year off again this year utilizing iReady for ELA for that particular grade as well. And then in the fall, as you can see, there is, again, what's tricky about some of this data is that it's not the same students. The question about, that the summer slide, but also just kind of looking at, well, it is what it is as far as some of that data has improved from when students took this data in the spring and then started in the fall. And then we definitely have some that had shown more of a regression. I will say that one of the things that we did differently this fall than we did last fall is that we set up an understanding that when we're doing the DRA and a level 28 or higher, we're asking students to do a writing component to that. And we did not do that last year, correct? Yeah, I'm just making sure. We had talked about whether or not, because that was a conversation that we had. Is the writing piece of the DRA something that we really want to push and ensure that our students are doing? Or do we just want to do the reading comprehension piece? Because we do get data from that, but yet because that does impact their overall composite score, that is part of what is a reason why some of this might have dropped, was because of that increase of an expectation that they had to write in response to share their reading comprehension.
So just to clarify, they don't then break out the reading results from the writing results, is all kind of mixed together?
Correct.
Got it. And just to make sure I am on track with this, some grades use iReady, some use DRA, but no one does both.
6th grade is the only one that's
6th grade still does
iReady.
both.
So here's the other piece. So yes, we are using iReady for 6th grade, but if any of those students were in the red, then we started using DRAs and DIBBLs because we wanted to say, okay, if you're below grade level, we need more data, we need more information. Absolutely.
Got it.
So
Okay.
there's a lot of, and even there's a lot of, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's subtests to some of these as well. So those subtests we can then progress monitors because again, we have data meetings and data meetings also have been very different. My understanding in speaking, and I might be getting ahead of myself in my project, but in speaking with some of the staff was a long time ago, intervention happened with the reading interventionist and the principal. That's how reading intervention got figured out. It wasn't right now when we have our data meetings, I incorporate the 2 classroom teachers, the reading specialist, the special education teachers, and myself, we're all sitting around the table looking at data and having conversations about what do we still need, who's going to be providing what, how do we best support our students who are in the red and in the yellow, because we want to make sure that they're going to be proficient readers. So that's definitely been a shift in how data is being looked at than it has been in the past. So it's still a work in progress. One of the things that also wasn't happening when I first started was there was no literacy plan. There was nothing to hold your hat on that said, okay, here's an understanding and a template for what happens in kindergarten. Here's what we are looking at for first grade all the way through. And that's something that we have been working on and have implemented slowly this year. And that's a work in progress. In fact, today in my PLC, we amended something because as we were reviewing this in 6th grade, we realized there was something else that we were doing that we wanted to incorporate. So this is an ever-changing thing, and it should. And we may feel like there's other assessments that we might need to incorporate at some point in time, but that needs to really be a bigger discussion and conversation when teachers are like, I need more information. What assessment might get me that? I don't want to be quick to do a knee-jerk kind of, we have to buy this program, we have to buy this thing. It really should be a bigger conversation that's had between the classroom teachers, our reading interventionists, as a collective whole, so that we are ensuring that we have the programs and assessments or diagnostics that we need to support students.
I'm going to just take this back to a quick clarifier.
Yeah.
When I'm reading this from spring of last year to fall of this year,
Yep.
those first graders became second graders. The second graders became, so
Correct.
roughly the same group of kids.
Roughly the same group, yes.
Just checking.
Yep, correct.
Because you just got to,
On a diagonal.
Yes, a
Right.
diagonal, yeah, I know.
so something went down between, there was one grade that had a
Third to
real-
fourth.
Third to fourth
Yeah.
was a real something.
So that is, yeah, right. So that's the bigger question about when that level 28 becomes, we ask kids to write about what they were,
That's what that was.
yeah,
Okay.
Got it.
absolutely.
That's what it was.
That's where the
just not
writing
on the
happened.
Correct.
page. Okay.
Correct. So that was not, so what I didn't provide here was if I had given data previously, like the year before, would that have looked different? And it probably would have, because this was the first year we asked all students in that grade to write, because that's what they needed to be for that particular composite.
But otherwise, they held or gained
Yeah,
pretty
they did.
well.
I mean, I know summer slide is a thing, but we've been trying to set the bar high to say that if they're really solid at the end of the year at that particular level, they shouldn't regress that significantly, because they've mastered what they needed to.
How are staff reviewing this data? How does it come to them?
They're doing the data. So that's also been something that's been a moving target in the past. Our reading interventionists did a lot of heavy lifting and did some of that data for them in the past. Now they're doing more of that data. So they're collecting the DIBELS data and the DRA data. They might get support if they really need it, but they're the ones collecting that data. And then we sit down and look at that data.
And is there a common shared report for what that looks like?
There is a shared document that they upload all that information so that we can look at that together. Yes.
And it is secure to the
Yes,
team?
it is.
Thank you for
Yes, it is.
clarifying that.
Only to the 2 classroom teachers that have that data, and the reading interventionist and myself. That is all.
Okay.
Yes.
How does administration or teachers or families even compare the data to the national standards, kind of? How do we compare Hatfield results to other schools?
As far as DIBELS DRA,
Yeah.
I haven't actually done an analysis of what our data looks like compared to others, because historically, basically, I mean, we at parent conferences will sit down and kind of share what the data is with families. This is what your child's DRA score is. Here's their DIBELS data, because not one particular assessment is going to encapsulate everything that we understand about them as a learner. So therefore, we present this data to families just to say, this is where your child is at, in comparison more to the classroom, because that's really where the family is concerned about. Where is my kid in comparison to their peers, and what the expectation is for this grade level. We don't really sit down and have conversations about what that data looks like compared to other schools.
And when do parents get that info?
Parents get that information at parent conferences.
Were the assessments done, since we moved parent
Parent
conferences
conferences
earlier
early.
this year, were the assessments done before that?
Okay.
Is the writing assessment that you added to the fourth graders, is that a different set of skills than is assessed with SRSD?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because that's all part of the DRA has a reading comprehension piece to it. And then once the students are done with that reading, they're then asked to write something about what they've read about. So that's different than the SRSD because that's genre specific. And that has a completely different rubric to score.
We're going to let you flip a slide.
And then we have our Dibbles data. Again, here's spring compared to fall. And this doesn't look as bad. I mean, as far as difference.
And just, I know we talked about this the last time we talked about assessments, but just for anybody listening or folks unfamiliar with these tests, the iReady, the DRA, and the DIBELS all measure literacy, but slightly different aspects of literacy, which is why we choose to do multiple
Correct.
things.
On the final slide is linked a
Beautiful.
huge breakdown of what is covered by what and at
Yeah.
which grade levels.
You know,
Just making sure if anyone had confusion.
and the Dibbles test different things at different grade levels. So the kindergarten one does letter naming fluency, phonemic segmentation fluency, nonsense word fluency, nonsense word, whole words read versus sight word, sounds of words. And
With
so
Dibbles, would you not be able to do like the diagonal comparison? Like kindergarten should look roughly even to first grade the next year, or like if kindergarten in spring was 50%, would you expect first grade in fall to be 50%, or are they measuring something slightly different each year so it doesn't quite translate?
Different targets.
Yeah, and then the numbers change completely, are completely different from
Okay.
kindergarten to first grade also, and to second and to third. So those continue to move. I mean, we have a blue range to a red range. So blue is like significantly above grade level, and then green is at grade level, yellow is slightly below, red is well below. But again, there's so many different parts,
Right.
but you can still, and then again, if a student is really weak in nonsense word fluency, then that might be something that the teacher is targeting when they're doing their reading with them, or something that they're doing at a center, and then they can progress monitor that. So we want to make sure that the data that that's in front of them is then really purposeful in their instruction, and that after 2 or 3 weeks, there's progress monitoring to ensure that whatever intervention was provided, the student is responding to. If the student's responding to it, then they might continue that same trajectory, or they might need to do some type of change of course of action and find something different to target.
Is there any caveat with fourth grade spring numbers where there were only 26% at or above the benchmark? That's a concerning.
Well, the Dibbles is timed, so that part of this, yeah, it's something to be looking at as far as it being an indicator of success, because it's a reading fluency, and reading fluency absolutely is impactful of reading comprehension. But it's also, it's also interesting that 46 or 26% of students in the spring, then 52%.
52%, I know, it's
Right.
up, well, and it's just like,
Right. Mhm.
Just for anybody listening or looking at home, if these percentages don't feel right, the national report card for 2022 fourth grade was 33% of students were reading at proficiency. So it's a national need.
Okay.
So I just wanted to point out that actually by and large, our numbers are much higher than other places.
when we have those national benchmarks, I find it so helpful to see them in comparison,
Yes.
just because we certainly don't know that. So that's really a little sidebar there. Thank you.
Mine, right? Mini dose of MCAS data. So if I wrote HPS, that means Hatfield Public Schools, and SWD is student with disability. So we've talked about this before. Because of our numbers, there's a lot of confidentiality issues with sharing by grade information. So I just pulled some doses that were meaningful to us. So in looking at the ELA for grades 3 through 8, for Hatfield students who are identified with a disability, we showed a higher achievement rate than the state, also for students with disabilities, but a lower growth rate than the state. And then for math, again, we showed a similar achievement rate, but a slightly lower growth rate than the state. So that lines up to the math data that we've been sharing, that we need this more targeted intervention. And so, it's great. I have access to the iReady data, to the everything. So I'm constantly diving in there and looking for trends. Another dose of data that is important in terms of validating our catchment systems. So we have our building support team and our data teams. One piece of data is that for grade 3, all the students in ELA that did not meet the expectations have already been identified as a student with a disability. So we're identifying our ELA students and they're being served on an IEP before 3rd grade.
So that was one of my questions, and I just want to double check I understood that. So everybody is captured in the data Melissa just went through.
Mhm.
And this is just, so is everyone with an IEP part of your SWD data here?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there anyone who is not on an IEP in students with disabilities numbers?
No.
Those are synonymous in this
Yes.
case. Just checking.
Yep.
Okay.
And then as Connor shared, except that there was, I think, one student for ELA in 10th that didn't meet competency, but all students with disabilities met competency at 10th grade for math, ELA, and science. So that's important as well. So we have the correct catchment in our early stages, and then we're validating the level of services we're providing as shown by the reaching competency for their 10th grade to graduate.
So as we think about looking at all the data, so first of all, this is a lot for the audience, for everybody here. What we're trying to build is a dialogue around really a comprehensive assessment system. We want teachers and administrators to know what the assessments are about, what they're assessing, and how that information can be used. It's so critical that they tie it back to, what am I doing tomorrow for instruction? What am I doing next month for instruction? Where do I need to emphasize instruction? Where can I back off where I don't need? Because each year a different group of kids might have different strengths. So that conversation that look at data needs to be every year. It's not something you can take for granted. We have implemented a new research-based math curriculum. We identified vocabulary as a key area for our grades 4 through 6. We're working on the ELA curriculum now. So we identified a series called Worldly Wise that teachers are using. It's a very well-known series. It's been around for a long time, and vocabulary is key. So we know that as kids increase their vocabulary, they will increase their reading skills as well as their complex thinking skills as well. We have 100% competency for graduation, which is what everybody is looking for by the time they get through 10th grade. We are obviously going to continue to look at science. The current assessment shows that we have areas of work that we need to do. We need to figure out how much time we're spending on science. We need to look at our curriculum for science and really emphasize more instruction. Again, that vocabulary piece may be a key element of that. but also just understanding basic principles of science is really critical for grades 5 and 8 as we go through this. And social studies is going to be important because right now they're going through a pilot for the MCAS assessment. It should be implemented next spring. And so that's going to be something that we'll be looking at as well as the next phase of our curriculum development plan. We feel very good about the work that our preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers did in terms of preparing our students for grade 1 this current school year. So that great foundational skills are so critical to how we're moving forward. And, I'm very proud of the work that all the administrators do in terms of our BST work with teachers in terms of looking at the instruction, the groupings. It's not stale, it's dynamic, and that's really important. We don't want kids to ever feel stuck. We want them to see, and that's why we're looking at growth. It's really important that kids see that they are growing, that success builds momentum. We know that in terms of looking at the work that we did in implementing our math curriculum last year, we need to look at pacing to make sure that we're covering all the material that we're supposed to cover in the curriculum as it's designed. And so that's really important that we are on target with that as well. And also, which is sometimes something that has to get used to, not spending as much time reviewing just because. We should review when it's important and it's critical for learning, but we don't review just because. And so that's something that we have to look at in terms of that pacing piece, in terms of those, especially those first few weeks of school. And, it's been said many times, but just to emphasize, we definitely feel that we're getting better at targeting instruction and intervention so that the kids who need the support, whether it's extending learning and advancing learning, or it's supporting and providing remedial support to build foundational skills is really critical. And that's the work of MTSS that we've started last year as well. And Molly mentioned the sort of the assessment lexicon that we have that helps everybody, ourselves and parents and the school committee know, where are we doing assessments and what are they about? So this is a pretty in-depth look at our assessment plan so far. And again, this will be dynamic as well, because if we feel like we're over-assessing in particular areas, we will make those kinds of adjustments. That's really important as well.
Big kudos to Molly for putting that together.
Yeah, it's
Huge
great.
kudos.
Thank you.
It's very nice, nicely accessible.
Might be the picture on the update tonight.
Questions? Let me go back here.
There was a question on the Hatfield parents page a couple weeks ago, and Kathy, if I'm stealing your thunder on this one, you can steal it back. There was a letter that went out from Smith Academy.
Mhm.
You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
The state has determined that Smith Academy is not receiving an overall accountability determination for the 22-23 school year due to insufficient data.
Yes. Didn't have enough kids take it.
Okay, that's what I
all.
figured.
Yeah, when you have a small sample size, it could easily be skewed one way or the other by a small number of students either doing exceptionally well or exceptionally poorly. And so they because we didn't have a high enough number take it, we got insufficient data.
You need 20 for accountability purposes.
Okay, I was wondering what the magic number was.
Okay.
20 per grade.
Per grade,
Yes.
in the assessment grade, yeah.
Do you guys utilize AP tests as part of the
We
assessment
do.
overall
Yeah, we use those as a measure of performance in AP classes. It wouldn't, we don't use that as a kind of a benchmark assessment, but we do use those to assess performance in AP classes. There've been a lot fewer students, even students who've taken AP classes in recent years, who've been actually taking the tests. So we're trying to reinvigorate that when you're enrolled in an AP course, you should be taking the AP test. There are some challenges there, but we're trying to push that back up.
I, for one, definitely appreciated the illumination on the MCAS results, but also tying into the other assessments that we're doing sort of formatively all the time. And also how we can use, like, I appreciated hearing more about how we are actually using that data to like inform decisions that we are currently making. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Early on, we had seen or talked or looked at having a central location to see all this data. What is the status of that effort?
Yeah, so I'm trying to reach out to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst and talk to people about how we could set up a 50,000 foot view of the data. I mean, we could put the raw data up there. Our attendance, our we just have to figure out what's valuable in terms of some of this, like Dibbles data and so forth, to put out there publicly on a big scale of things, whether it's percentages, if it's raw scores, scaled scores even. So I've got to have some input on that to figure that out, and then how to graphically format that so that it can be a page on our website.
For it to have meaning and
Yeah.
for it to be secure.
Secure, and also so it's not an added job responsibility, but that can be fed regularly so that it's live.
I guess my understanding of it was always that it was going to be something more geared to staff to use, that we were giving them a tool. I never necessarily saw that as something that lived on our website as a public facing thing,
Well,
but just making sure that staff had an easy way to get it, because
Right.
we've got a lot of pieces that they need to kind of continuously keep track of. So
even on the staff page, which we could lock down, we could put it there as well.
okay, just curious where that was. Anything else before we move on? So next up are administrative reports, and I'm going to ask the committee, given that we have had the opportunity to read the administrative reports, do you feel comfortable waiving the check-in on those tonight in lieu of we have other things? I want to make sure I've got forehead nods because I don't want to take anybody's chance to ask questions there. Okay. Administrators, do you have any thing you want to make sure we hear from you directly? Okay.
I just want to call out the work that really Paul Duvall and Ben Snyder did in keeping after the feds to follow up on a grant that initially was done by Paul Duvall, who was our tech coordinator. I think really it started 3 years ago. It was during COVID, but this was a federal initiative related to E-rate, but like a sister. And we are going to be getting 150 Chromebooks as a result. So kudos to them for making that happen and making sure it happened for us.
Woohoo! Free Chromebooks.
Can I follow that up too with
Yeah.
a PACE update? Because we received a letter of distinction for our district's high percentage of students who take computer science courses up through all the grades. And Smith Academy has received another extension of our PACE, which is the Programming for the Acceleration of Computing and Equity grant, to the tune of $20,000 for this year. That was after having received $15,000 a year in the last 2 years, and that's a testament to a lot of the work that the team at Smith Academy has been doing. The computer science teachers there, which has been great and really benefiting our students. I mean, they're 3D printing things that I couldn't even dream of. So they're designing them.
That's awesome. Okay. So that's a good segue into school finance subcommittee. And I will pass that torch. Mr. Sullivan.
Hi. So at our last budget meeting, which was actually about a month ago, pretty long meeting, but we discussed our current FY23 budget track. We discussed our pre-K enrollment being down for the year and ways that we could consider bolstering that in years to come. or ways that we just may need to adjust to decrease enrollment if that is the ongoing trend. One of the things that we discussed was looking at adding before and after care as an option for preschool. It's certainly, and it's something that's advantageous to all the other grades in elementary school. It makes parenting easier, and it would make preschool more attractive for Hatfield parents as an option. And it was something Mr. Wood was going to follow up with Ms. Petra on, and I think we have a discussion on that later in the agenda. Otherwise, FY24, we're looking pretty good. Mr. Wood is getting the heat exchanger fixed in the gym for less than $10,000, which is the magic number. We will have some transfers in upcoming budgets to just cover some anticipated long-term leaves. We did have a couple of large capital items, $6,500 for a new floor scrubber, and then $8,700 in change for some new IT devices. But of note in that, Mr. Wood highlighted that was spending the $8,700 instead of spending $10,000 or possibly more for new servers. So long-term savings there. We discussed the busing contract. Busing contract in process. We write the contract. Mr. Wood's going to publish it, and we'll have an update on that hopefully at our next meeting. We discussed some options on trying to save money on buses that may or may not seem somewhat outlandish, but it was kind of no idea was taboo. Considering just route changes, looking at starting schools simultaneously to decrease the number of rides, or just consolidating the buses. So right now we run 2 routes for each school, and discussed if you could do 1 route instead of 2, which may or may not actually be reasonable. We were looking into, do we need to provide enough busing for anyone who actually rides the bus or anyone who is eligible to ride the bus? Mr. Wood, I don't know if you had a follow-up on that.
We're supposed to plan for anybody who is eligible.
Okay.
Right.
Because currently we probably could cut some busing out. We have a lot of space available, but we have more people who could be taking the bus that don't.
Right. So like I said, we should hopefully have an update on that at our next business meeting. We'll talk more about that at our next finance meeting. Mr. Wood was looking into reducing our utility costs. It sounds like he was successful in that.
Yeah, I'm still looking on the gas portion as well. Electricity, I'm still looking at different options. Trying to do reference checks on the one that I put in your packet to make sure that that's a reputable company. But regardless, I will be able to get something that's lower than what we're currently doing from Eversource.
Grants, Dr. Driscoll highlighted the PACE grant. Mr. Wood was looking into the Green Lights Grant Initiative, which was to help us access more grant funding, which is a program that was actually established by Matthew McConaughey to help smaller schools access grants that are just sitting there unused, which most grants seem to just be doing. Other grants are on track. We're still waiting on the Green School Works grant, which is the hoping for a new solar roof at the elementary school. Still nothing as far as we know yet. Still haven't closed out FY23. There's
That's not on us.
what's that?
That's not on us.
It's not on us. There's
That's
a
a townwide
discrepancy,
thing.
but it seems to be a discrepancy caused between different accounting systems used between the school and the town. So there may be some small discrepancies to settle out, but it's still just pending. Nothing new.
Yeah, they're making progress, but they're not done yet on the town side.
Okay. Capital planning requests. It was discussed, basically the boilers and the roof remain the priority, and the boilers have kind of jumped to the top priority. I'm starting to get those capital planning committee emails. So just make sure we have our applications in by December 1st.
Right. I just got the paperwork today, so it's the capital plan can come before the finance committee, but I won't be able to get it before the school committee before our next meeting. They just
We can look at it in finance subcommittee though.
Okay.
hasn't changed much.
And then the last thing we discussed was in detail was just planning for FY25. We're expecting a draft budget for our next finance meeting. We'll discuss at the next business meeting here. Discuss just making sure we're not making any additional long-term staff hires for this year unless we have a plan to be able to pay for that staff in future years. We do anticipate having to make some cuts for FY25.
Can I take that over?
Yeah,
Do
you can
mind?
jump in.
So I've shared, there are some numbers available to take a look at. Um, Seeing this conversation coming, Mr. Wood and I actually reached out to the HTA and had a really productive meeting with the leadership there, because we need to be having some conversations about budgets much earlier than we traditionally do. So there's obviously been a lot of interest in what kind of school choice enrollment we had, because that drives additional income into our budget. Certainly we knew when we went into last year's budget and we talked about the need for an incremental support from town, knowing sort of where our school choice numbers had gotten, that the long-term plan has always been to drive greater enrollment to help offset costs again, which we have traditionally done incredibly well with. With anything, there's always a bit of a gap between like the investment and the investment paying off, right? So we got an investment that we were able to start working with this school year. We don't have the dividends of that investment showing up yet. And so what that looks like, because the way the school choice tuition process works, it's always lagging by a year. And so what I wanted to put in front of you tonight, and we gave a little bit of a heads up to the teachers as well, was a way to take a look at what the town budget has been over the past many years, what we have supplemented from school choice funds, and to parallel that with what the DESE tuition coming in any given year. And just, I want to call out a couple of things just to track this conversation before it goes further. Prior to my time on the school committee, I had always heard we had millions and millions of dollars in school choice funds in a little bank account just waiting to supplement. And as Kathy is giggling over here next to me, that has just never been the case. Nope. It is a really nice idea, right? Because we did beautifully well at recruiting school choice kids because people want to come to school in Hatfield. And we have more people coming here than most districts have coming in. And that has supplemented our overhead really nicely. But over time, and I'm talking time going back to 2018 and before, we have seen a shift in what we needed to spend in school choice funds versus the tuition that was coming in. And it wasn't necessarily that the tuition was dropping so much, but we were just spending more of that to offset what we asked of town. Mm-hmm. And so you can see that the increase in the town spending year over year often was under 2.5%, which is the max that we could increase the tax base, the levy. So on average between 2016 and 2022, we were looking at a 2.24% increase from town. And we've been able to offset that with school choice funds. But because we've been spending those school choice funds down for many years, we're now at a point we don't have those funds. And so this year, our budget has $827,000 of school choice dollars. Next year, my estimation, based on the number of school choice students we had in October 1st, is that we're looking at something more like 620,000. So you'll see, assuming the average we've had for the past 9 years per student, which is $72.85 per student from school choice, that's $619,224 to be really precise. Hopefully we have a few dollars to save back from this year, but I don't think we should bank on having a lot. And so if that is the number we have available to spend, I just wanted to run a couple of really quick scenarios to say, what might a budget look like for us going into fiscal 25? So if the town said, we will give you a 2.5% bump to what we gave you this year, the difference, given the limited school choice funds, would be probably about $131,000 less than what we have in this year's budget. If they gave us the 2.24% bump, which was sort of where we traditionally have been, that would leave us with a gap of over 146,000. If they said, we gave you a really big increase last year, school committee, we're going to level spend, not level service, we're just going to give you the same amount we gave you last year, then the gap we'd be looking at would be closer to 280,000. If it was punitive and they said, we're going to reset, you got a really big bump for a year, but we're going to reset you back to fiscal year 23 plus a little bit, we would be looking at a gap of closer to 881,000. Based on an increase of 6%, which is sort of where we have seen a lot of costs go, if we level serviced, just a totally quick guess, we could be looking at asking for another 400,000. I don't think that that is likely to see for some. I just can't imagine getting that. I have a hard time imagining us even asking for that, given where our enrollment is. And so as you take a look at what those scenarios might look like, I mean, that's kind of a big range, right? I want you to keep in mind a couple of things. One, that's the delta between the money they gave us this year and the money we would have to start with. That doesn't factor in, we will have cost increase. So, I mean, we have a negotiated salary increase with our staff. We can figure out what that is, and I think we will have that by the next time we come back. We'll know what that increase is, assuming no change to staffing. Adam mentioned the bus contract. There's no reason we should assume, unless we do something really dramatically different with busing, that we're going to not see, like, it's likely there will be an increase in the bus costs. There are some other places we're likely to see cost increases that are not going to be something the committee or administration can control, which just means the number that you're looking at for that delta between the incoming, it's going to grow from there in terms of what we're going to have to find to cut. And we have some hard choices coming. I do think there's a couple things to be optimistic about. One, we're having this conversation in November and not in March. Two, we're already reaching out and having conversations so that we're partnering with and bringing everybody to the table. I reached out and have already started conversations with town finance to say, heads up, this is what we're seeing. What do you think? They're helping us do some explorations as well. Can we find some funding to look at studies that say, how do small schools have the optimized education programs when they have small numbers within these restrictive budgets? Like, how do we make the most out of what we have? When I look at the numbers, I'll tell you the assumption I make is we can't continue to do what we have always been doing. That we're going to something will have to be different. And for that to be equitable, we're going to have to be a little innovative. And I think those innovations could be really good educationally for our kids. So this isn't to say that we're bringing a plan in front of the committee. This is to say it's November. We have time to sit down and work together to find some solutions. We have time to get some support if we want to have outside studies come in and help us and reach out to do that work. And we have time to build a plan that makes sense, knowing that we're looking at some changes. And so this is just where the numbers are today with what we know. Anybody have questions, things they want to share, concerns they want to raise, a beer they want to cry in? It's a lot to soak in.
You've got to wonder about the bizarro universe in which COVID didn't strike and your numbers didn't drop. 56 school choice kids, literally just since COVID. How much of that was precipitated by that event?
Yeah.
Ongoing event.
I mean, I think the timing certainly hit there, but I mean, I went back and looked at numbers again today, and the biggest driver of our enrollment issue is just we've lost 32% of the population of students over the last many years. The town has fewer students. Western Massachusetts has fewer students. It's not
just
it's not just us. Our loss in number of students is a little higher. Like we have a greater percentage loss than the average of the region, but the average of the region is still over it's like still 24%. Like it's everybody's having that problem. COVID didn't help. That certainly took us faster in that direction. The other thing that isn't I'm still personally celebrating is the fact that we didn't lose at the rate we had been losing, right? So it's like the tourniquet is on. So we had a big loss a couple of years ago, and while we didn't gain what we wanted to gain this year, we didn't lose the way we had lost previously. So the pace of the downslide
Inflection toward this.
changed. We leveled that off. Again, we need to turn it around. But in the meantime, we're going to have to manage with less.
Regarding the busing, we're kind of stuck in a stuck position because we're so small. We don't get a lot of people bidding for our busing contract. If we were trying to cut costs for us there, I don't know that anybody would bid on us. The state requirement says we don't have to provide busing at the secondary level, but if we took out that bus, we'd have, no contract really that anybody would want to bother to bid on.
Right.
It's such a difficult situation. So there's no money really there
That's why
to
I'm
look
saying
at, to look at saving.
I don't think we're saving there.
No. And fuel costs only go up, so.
It was $1.99 for gas in Greenfield the other day. For like 6 hours. There were two gas stations. There were two gas stations having a gas price war.
They do that intermittently.
If only the buses could fill up just at the right time.
Maybe that mythical van driver wants to buy a bus and just do the contract for us. Oh.
So I guess I just want to say we're starting this conversation early in school finance. We're starting the conversation early with teachers so that we make plans together that everyone can feel good about, because every single one of us needs to be rolling together.
And to be clear that we're very upfront and we've been discussing the enrollment numbers every single month for the past several months.
Publicly, yes. Yeah. And facing the numbers, right? So that's where we are. And I think, pushing for innovation because I think there are some really unique things we could be doing, and those conversations are starting. So, anything else?
Just on that last note, I wonder if I wonder how, for the innovation, I just wonder how patient the town will be in allowing us to try to find an innovative solution. I
think
hope
it-
that that's there.
I think innovative solutions are going to have to live within the parameters of a
More restrictive
decreased
budget.
budget. My guess is that we are going to be living at a level spend, and that's around $300,000 less. But we're going to have to get increased costs out of that too.
Is it this week that Dr. Driscoll is going to that?
The innovations in education.
Is
Did you
that
get a
this week?
chance to- I think that was last week.
That was last week.
It was last week?
Yeah.
So we're looking for everything. Do you guys anything you want to chime in about?
Just that, I would just emphasize, planning early, having everybody at the table, hearing what the town is, what the town has available and what they're doing, what we're doing collectively as a town is going to be really important so that, the conversation is everybody pulling in the right direction. It's not each department for itself.
So, and working to get more families into town.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the 2040 committee, Rebecca, doing much around like growth planning in terms of
Yeah,
attracting
I mean,
as much
it's
as
covering a lot of
covering.
different
Mhm.
things.
Good.
Yeah, but that has definitely been a conversation.
Good.
So unless there's more we want to talk about, and as you start to think about things to explore, there may be a subcommittee, there may be a task force, something to start working on this more particularly. I wouldn't be surprised. So still sorting that path out. With that, Ms. Bench, you want to talk about policy subcommittee work?
Sure.
Awesome.
I don't know, policy's doing great. We met twice in October. Our first meeting on October 10th, we worked on revising the social media policy in accordance with the first reading feedback and continued our general review of policies. We had a second meeting where we kept doing our review of policies. Those are mostly being prepared for the December meeting. We also initiated a discussion regarding a potential cell phone policy, which we had been identified as a policy to investigate for this year. So we basically had a preliminary conversation about it and just we're sort of considering some things. We're open to committee feedback just on our thoughts. So we were thinking about, for example, this is like a totally potential policy. So what approach would the committee prefer? Would you like to see the policy subcommittee draft something to present, see samples of other district policies, or maybe something else? Would a potential policy cover student cell phone use or also include employee cell phone use? And then how do we gather feedback from our school community stakeholders? Is there a research consensus on best practices? This is sort of something that a lot of districts are struggling with right now, sort of innovating around. I don't know that there's a consensus on a best practice, but we thought we would just bring that up. So if any committee members or members of the administration want to let us know about best practices, we are open to that. Or if the committee has an opinion about an approach you'd like to see us take and what would be helpful to you, I don't know.
Thoughts?
I think that seeing other districts, what they're doing around a cell phone policy would be helpful. I actually do think that having one for both students and faculty, that sort of makes sense to me. And then refresh my memory because we had conversations about Apple Watches and
Yes.
all. So would
Which
that be
we were,
included?
that is what we were
Okay.
hoping to roll that in. Like smart devices, personal devices.
And then I'm just curious, because the last time we talked about it, a lot more elementary school students had access to these things than I would have thought. So is it an ongoing issue? Is it an issue? Cell
any
phones,
grade
smart
level, yeah.
devices.
To a certain extent, I think it can be distracting. I don't think that's, it's more the watches. I think too many kids are too quick. And then we've had a few instances where kids have texted their families in the middle of the day where they really shouldn't need to be doing that. But overall, I mean, I think it's not a daily thing, but it has been something that I have heard some feedback on. But to my knowledge, I don't think it's been a
pretty, am I allowed to speak? I'm sorry. I was like, at my level, they are kept in their lockers. I don't want to see them if they come out. I take them until the end of the day. The watches have been a periodic issue, but there's been no, they follow those rules without much of a concern.
Anything from the
At
high school?
The middle school, the expectation is that they're in students' lockers, that they're not using them. There's this one designated time during the day where they can use them. They can't use them at lunch either. It's more of a social time. In the high school, the expectation is that they don't use them during class unless they're asked to by a teacher for a specific reason, which, sometimes that happens, although now students all have devices issued, so that shouldn't happen. So that, and if the student violates that, then they're given a disciplinary consequence. Could be loss of privilege for the phone, can be detention, things along those lines.
I know when we discussed handbooks, we did discuss cell phones briefly as well. Helpful.
I think other points, if they do get stolen, lost, broken at school, just that the school is not liable for that. Videotaping and taking pictures or audio taping makes me very nervous.
That's the part when they come out that it's like, I share that concern.
Runs afoul of wiretapping law
Yes, it does.
and FERPA and other things.
So many
In the
places.
handbook.
Yeah, and the handbook.
Dr. Driscoll, you're familiar with Wacona's policy on it? It's rather prohibitive.
With what now?
Wacona has a rather prohibitive cell phone policy. They use pouches.
Yeah,
students have to-
so we did,
I've heard of those.
the policy committee did start reviewing sort of some regional policies. Yes, in some places, like down to the school, they have special pouches they have to go into. Some are much more broad. I think a lot of districts are looking at it.
At some point, there will be good evidence-based data to say.
At some point, there will be better evidence-based data. Yes.
It's kind of hard to get that right now.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the committee on the approach you would like policy to take in terms of presentation or feedback?
I like that you're looking for stakeholder feedback early on, given
Yeah.
that this one would be a little more
Yeah.
broad, like finding a way to build in some
Mhm.
community feedback. I mean, we could certainly put a call out to say we're having a hearing to
Mhm.
hear feedback on this as part of one of our meetings or as a separate standalone, could be online.
Or even potentially sending out a Google survey to parents. I do feel like as a parent, if my kids had these things, it would be a lot easier, right, to text them things during the day or if there's a pickup or whatever, but that's really not appropriate. So I think having community feedback around that, because I see that being a contentious issue of you're saying I can't, communicate with my child while they're in school. I can see that being
Which there is always a way to get in touch with your child.
Right.
They call
Right.
the secretary and the secretary relays that
But I
information to the classroom.
Totally hear what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Also, yeah.
It's the immediacy that people are used to.
Right. Or have grown to be used to. Because
Yes.
certainly no one could get a hold of us when we were in the middle of school.
We could get the payphone back outside the bathrooms.
There was the payphone. My gosh, make a collect call. Did you have anything you wanted to add? No. Okay. Did you have anything
So-
else?
Nope.
Okay. All right, great. We are going to be working on that moving forward.
So we're looking at 6 policies tonight
Yep.
with a vote requested.
Yeah, so we kind of broke them down and we can take the vote together or however the committee would like. So we have 3 policies we're recommending to update, policy KN, KE, and KBBA. KN and KBBA actually have no changes. We just reviewed them and compared them with the current standards and found them to be just fine. So we'd like to renew those. Policy KE, we made one word change. It was a pronoun that we changed to something gender neutral. And so those we feel basically have no changes. So we would like to waive the additional readings and vote on that. And as we were doing our review, we also came across a number of policies that aren't actually even policies at all, don't really belong in our handbook. So a couple of procedures and a couple of forms that were attached to other existing policies that we are recommending to eliminate. So just to waive any further reading of that and simply eliminate those. We did confirm that the procedures are covered elsewhere, through other venues, and also reached out to administration regarding the forms to make sure that those forms weren't going to be somehow lost if we eliminated them from the policy manual.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
Do you have anything?
Nope, there's just 6 individual ones that we're looking to eliminate.
Yes.
oh, because yes, I
Because
see.
they're like
There's
all these
multiples on the
weird
same.
dash
I'm with
A,
you.
dash
1, 2,
B,
3.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So 6 to eliminate
Just
and
wanted to
3
be
to
clear on
renew.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take this in. I would suggest we take this in 2 blocks.
Sure.
One block for the no changes or one word change. Maybe we could do those at once, and then one block for the 6 to eliminate. Does anybody, before we get to the point of having a motion on the table, is there anything that anybody wants to discuss and pull out? Okay. Is there a motion for approving KN, KE, and KBBA to include the one word change in KE
And waiving the readings.
and waiving all readings?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Great. Is there a motion to eliminate policies IHBBA-R, KBBA-A, KBBA-B, KBBA-C, and KEB-R, KEB-RA,
Amazing.
and to eliminate those with no additional readings? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, a motion and second. All in favor of the elimination, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And so it is. And so now we can go on to a second reading for IJNDD, the employee social media use. Ms. Bench.
All right. So for IJNDD, we did take the feedback received during the first reading. If you recall, our first reading was like entirely new, completely new content. So the edits you will see noted in green are edits since the first reading. If you want to reference the original policy, well, really the current policy as it is written, including the attached procedure, those are copied like at the very bottom, like on the pages at the bottom of the document. So yeah, we tried to take into account feedback that we received previously. Anything you want to say about this one?
No, it feels pretty solid to me.
Yeah, I think we sort of, there had been a discussion at the last meeting about like professional social media accounts. We sort of like clarified and eliminated part of that section, and we clarified the wording around communications between family members. Yeah.
I'm just taking a chance to read through the.
Yeah, we're
that
open to
again.
feedback.
Did this go through the school attorney?
Not yet.
Okay.
We were kind of waiting to,
On our next
see
round of
if there were
feedback.
any more edits
Gotcha.
before we sent it to him.
I think there were some questions from the staff about this. I suspect.
I don't know. I don't recall anything specific. Did you
Well,
guys-
there's something you said to me about like field trips.
Mhm.
Oh, yes.
That's
yes.
the feedback,
One
right.
was the issue of what could teachers do for field trip usage, because they would like to have their phones numbers of students, especially like on the Washington trip or our music trip at Smith Academy. And I think what we talked about was we're looking for an app that can do that.
Can
that
you
would
give an
through this-
update to that?
Sure. So we've been looking at because some teachers use an app called Remind that does something like that. Some use other apps. We actually through our portals, through the portals apps that we have, I've been in contact with someone at Redeker that has that capability. So you can and I haven't seen it in action, so I don't know how clunky it is or how seamless it is. But in theory, according to them, if I have the Plus Portal app on my phone and a student has the Plus Student or Student Portal, whatever it's called, on their phone, and parents have the Parent Portal Plus on their phone, you can send messages between those and get a notification as similar to a text message. And that would work anywhere that either a cell phone has service or has Wi-Fi, which could be beneficial if it works. Additionally, excuse me, earlier in the year we had been talking about using an app for coaches to connect with their players, the Sports Connect app, which the town uses. And so we were running the risk of being in a position where we had 3 different messaging apps that we were asking employees to use. So if we were able to do it through portals or through one consistent app, we could say, okay, for everything school related, this is the communication platform that we're using. So it's not, you wouldn't have to worry about getting your sports messages from one app and everything from a different, and the additional burden on teachers who might also be coaches and might also be running field trips. If there were different apps doing different things, that's a level of confusion for them as well. So we're hopefully going to have a walkthrough on how that looks, and the other pieces we're already paying for it, so we already have
Should
that
use it.
system, and it's already
I love
being
this.
used for like grade books and things like that. So it will likely be more seamless for the high
Mhm.
school because I think students and
Right.
families and teachers are they're used to communicating through the portal anyway.
This policy is the social media policy, and there
Right.
will be another one.
So we also
Or-
didn't dive too far into the
Because it starts-
texting and
because
things like that.
Those
Because it
start
kind
to
of,
cross over, right?
so
Yeah.
we did change in point 4-A, we said, change the wording a little to say the preferred method of communication is through the district's official platforms, which I think will extend into the Plus
Right.
portal and things like that, but we did not go into a ton of detail about.
My only question about that was if preferred method is strong enough. It seems
Right.
optional.
It does.
Yeah.
I think we could take out preferred. In all cases, the method of communication is through the district's official platforms.
Provided we've given platforms that meet the
Right.
need, right?
Yeah.
That's the caveat there, but yes. And the call out for family members.
Yes. And I hope the clarification was helpful there. Okay. Any other feedback from the committee about the edits?
So we can bring this back next month for the vote.
And we'll send it to legal.
Let's just make sure legal is particularly because the guidelines have some clear
Yes.
ground rules, which I think are helpful to the district.
Yeah.
But I really do want to make sure the lawyer says
And
yes.
I think what you're referring to, which was 1-B,
Mm-hmm.
We got from another district's
Right.
direct policy. So
I know that, but
Okay.
all the more,
We'll
but just
still send it.
maybe they had a
it's
bad
not like you
lawyer.
just kind of winged it.
No, I didn't think you winged it.
Such great writers. Yeah, okay.
And for anyone who's wondering what that is, I'm just going to read it now that we've talked about it. So it's
Yes.
clear. District employees are cautioned that comments on or off duty regarding information obtained through their official duties is not protected speech under the First Amendment because it owes its existence to the employee's professional duties and responsibilities. Such comments may form the basis for discipline if deemed detrimental to the district. So if someone took what they learned at work and
Because
then
of their job.
because of their job, and then
Said
Gossiped
something
about it.
we're making inappropriate comments about
Right.
the school, the district. There
Right.
would be
for
there would be a
students or-
way for administration to take action. So,
All right.
all righty.
Uh,
So
the policy committee rests
thank you
until
guys
next
for-
month.
I really appreciate all the work. I think we all do. I know we've had a lot of policy work this year. We have 3 votes requested on some job descriptions that we're catching up with. We're catching up with 1 and 2 are new.
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
So, as Mr. Sullivan mentioned in our school finance, we were talking about the idea of trying to build up our preschool program by adding a before and after school program. So I was starting by looking at job descriptions. I thought we had one for the before and after care, but it was just the posting that we wrote. So I put together one for a after and before school coordinator, a preschool after before care coordinator, and then we're trying to look at our current need, and we'd like to add the position of behavior education, behavior technician job description. This could be what we'd like to have is somebody who is trained with something called an RBT, a registered behavior technician background. A little more training and in-depth training, something we could offer actually to our existing staff who might be interested and has that desire to go in that depth of training, or other districts often have the position, so we would possibly invite somebody to come work for us. And we're still looking for trying to contract with somebody for that. And that would fill an existing position, so it's not adding a new position.
So it would potentially change who would be available to fill that position?
I'm not
Does it-
sure. Well, it makes, the qualifications make it a more precise type of candidate that we're looking for.
Okay.
So, makes sense.
Questions from the committee?
On the after and before care coordinator positions, a question for Ms. Petra is does the descriptions of the jobs meet your expectations for those jobs?
Yes, I actually had editing, right, so I actually
Okay.
edited things
Okay.
and had some questions too. So yes.
Can I ask a clarifying question about that same job description for the after and before school coordinator? It says it's for children ages in grades 1 through 5. Do we not include 6th grade?
We do. Yeah, it's one
We
through
can
six.
fix that.
Okay. And then a lot of the descriptions simply refer to the after school coordinator, like at the whole end, it's all the after school coordinator. But in every case, we still mean before and after.
Correct.
This is the same job.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Got it.
After and before is the same job.
Same job.
Right.
But-
Because the whole end section just says the after school coordinator.
But after and before, and then the preschool coordinator position, we're looking for two
Two separate-
separate coordinate,
Separate programs.
Correct.
two separate programs. And that, do we have to do it that way?
You don't have to, but I think we'll get more,
Wrapping preschool in
yeah.
I think wrapping,
with sixth grade is.
yeah.
Correct. The challenge has been the box and after school care has really kind of shied away from saying yes to preschool because typically it's an incredibly long day anyway because our preschool actually goes full day with our regular school. There's been the issue that we don't require at this point in time that a student be potty trained in order to be enter preschool. So then there's the whole diapering piece that comes into play. So Julie wasn't feeling super comfortable with knowing that she might need to have, and with staffing being a challenge as it is, the idea that we've been able to, partner with Smith Academy and getting students to work in the after school program to support Julie with some of the overseeing of the kids in the program. The idea that then we would have to be utilizing some middle school or high schoolers to then potentially work with preschoolers with the idea of napping and potty training, and it just didn't seem like that. So we would need somebody to be kind of a little bit more keen to the needs developmentally of a 3-4-year-old in hopes that one of our preschool teachers might be interested in that position. And then that would just kind of make sense to then potentially utilize if there is the need for additional staffing that our preschool ESPs might also be interested in supplementing their income by participating in that as well. So then at least it's it'd be a longer day for them, but at least, again, the idea is that it needs to be a bit more separate, particularly around the potty training and diapering.
Another piece is the physical location of the safe-sized playground.
Right.
So some districts have their preschool together because the preschool playground abuts the general, the K-6 playground, because preschool playground needs to be fenced and there's all these rules about that. Ours is, there's a building in the way, so they physically can't watch from both locations. So that's another component, is we can't have preschoolers on the bigger playground.
By creating this job description, does that mean we're going ahead with this program?
It means that we want to explore it. Doesn't mean that we definitely
Okay.
do.
It doesn't mean that we're definitely going
Right.
to hire.
We may not be able to find anybody to fill the job.
That's true That's true
Well.
as well, but I didn't know if it had already progressed to the point
No.
where we've decided, yes, we want to pursue this.
In preschool applications, it had been requested a few times, but in different families, do we offer a before care or after school for preschoolers? And when we said no, that was sometimes for, I think, some families, a reason why they stayed in their current childcare position, because we didn't offer that. So-
I think we would actually see people, if we were able to pull this off, I think we would see people asking to move their preschoolers in mid-year.
Mhm.
And I mean, one of the places where our head count is so behind this year when we look at our enrollment is the preschool count is off by 13, 14 kids. I mean, it's a big difference this
Jump
year.
from previous.
And this was one of the places where like we could fill that if we solved this parent need.
And the current before and after care programs are pretty self-sustaining,
Very much so.
right? Like
Completely
they're
self-sustaining.
excellent, excellent.
And
So we
they're
could
more-
hope the same for preschool.
And they are more cost affordable than most than any local daycare we have
Correct.
compared to.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
not only do they pay for themselves, they're a good deal for families. It's a win-win. My question really comes in the after/before school coordinator job in keeping records of payments. I'm wondering if that task really sits with that or if that sits with the school. The tracking payment feels like a place we have room for improvement. And if that really, I'm not, I wonder where it sits. And I noticed it's not in the preschool job.
Well, it's in that one purposely because of two reasons. One, historically, a lot of our families, because they have more contact with Miss Lanaville, because they're dropping their kids off at the before care program or they're picking them up in the aftercare program, historically, they are the ones who are kind of like handing her payment. So yes, it's possible to have that mailed in and Miss Forget can be handling that as the administrative assistant, but they've kind of like tag teamed this because just the nature of Julie having the email contact and being the point person when there's a change. And, yes, they'll sometimes send it to Michelle about, I'm not picking my kid up or they're not gonna be coming this time. But most of the families are communicating more with Julie through that than they are with Michelle.
That feels like, we use Box and Aftercare a lot. And we communicate with Ms. Lanaville, about just like logistics, like, hey, Owen's coming these days, but not these days. But at the beginning of the year, we agreed to 2 days a week Aftercare, 3 days a week Box. So those terms are not discussed again. So we just, we send out our monthly
First
payment for the,
payment.
yeah. So it seems like beyond establishing the initial, we agree, or we're electing to send our students on these terms. Ms. Lanaville doesn't really need to be involved in the finances beyond that. And then whether it's Ms. Forget or whoever in the town or in the school takes the payment from there, it seems like an odd route to add an extra person involved in the money to go to Ms. Lanaville to then bring it to the office to then, then it goes to the high school and then it goes to town hall and then.
Not to mention it would be lovely if we could find a better way just to make it easier to collect funds. I mean, I think the root of this is having to hand off cash or a check to anybody in 2023.
Go find a checkbook.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
that's hurdle number
We can definitely do
one.
it through My School Bucks.
We've got to find a better
Yeah,
way.
Does My School Bucks work currently?
Does it still?
It's available.
Okay. I had 2 parents reach out to me about issues with pre-K
Sitting there
payments.
from back in the day. I know. I got $100 in lunch money back.
2019.
Well, how do families pay for class dues at Smith Academy?
I think they typically do it just through a check.
Yeah.
But it's a one-time
It's a one-time
thing.
yeah.
This is every month somebody's making a payment. Every month it's like, okay, how much is it for these 3 days and this month? It could be better. It could be easier. And if we could make it electronic,
It sounds like it
It
would be
would-
less work.
it would be less
Yes.
work for everyone. It
work.
would be easier to track what came in, which is good for everybody.
And because just of the way the
It'd be
town does
easier.
accounting, it takes weeks for your check to clear. So you don't know if that check got misfiled for like 6 weeks.
That is true.
My 9-year-old give
That
the
is
check to Ms. Lanaville. That's the question I ask.
Right. And if we figured this out for this, we could do it for preschool.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what they just said. Preschool payments too.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. That would be good.
in our
Preschool might be a little bit, well, we should be able to do it.
if we're
The
collecting
town
money,
doesn't have a
payments are a
good
nightmare.
mechanism for doing electronic payments. We would have to, I think we could do it for preschool payments. I think we'd have to look a little more in depth with that, but because it is a revolving account, so we should be able to, but it's an account that they sort of oversee.
And this definitely isn't the first time we've discussed this here. And so it's an ongoing issue, if not among the 5 of us, certainly within the community. So
sure.
finding a better way in 2023, 2024, I would like to be able to establish a deadline. Like we will have a better solution for payments for things for pre-K, box, aftercare, whatever else.
Right.
Like,
Look into it before I
by,
get a deadline.
okay.
I mean, we could,
So but we can come back and talk more about it
Yeah.
next month.
Let's throw that on the agenda.
I'm with
Thanks,
that.
finance.
I had a question about the registered behavior tech position. Is that for Hatfield Elementary or Smith, or a combination, or?
I would
As
say it's a
needed.
district position, but right now it's being assigned to the elementary school.
So we don't have a current position. What in our discussion of our struggle to find ESPs, and part of that is a lot of folks who had been paraprofessionals have found their way into ABA agencies and have gained their RBT certificate. And when they're working for an agency, they're only getting a small portion of what, say, if I went to an agency and said, can I contract your RBT? I have to pay a very high amount, and that person only receives a smaller amount. But what that person receives is still above our paraprofessional pay rate. So it does seem like, and a lot of districts are doing this. Some districts are doing sort of a separate contract, an individual contract with folks. Some are adding them to their sort of CNA CODA level, some kind of specialized paraprofessional position, which is what.
Which we have in our contract.
Yep, we
So
have that
kinda
rate.
have that pay grade in there.
But RBT is not listed there, and that's sort of the piece to having this job description. It would kind of add that potentially to that listing. And it would only be if we require that. And thinking about how we've worked through several different BCBA models in the past few years while I've been here and well before I was here, looking at what different towns are doing. This is one option. So we wanted to try and continue to be innovative and figure out how we can best fill our positions.
So it's not that you currently have like one position that you want to fill with an RBT. It's
We have open ESP positions, and if we could reorganize over time, it may make sense. We might reduce BCBA hours, have this position. So we just want to have options.
It's a step down from one, a step up from the other.
Sort of, yeah.
But
We would still need a supervising BCBA, which we do have a staff member who has their BCBA. So there's nothing right now that is saying we need this in any way. It's just looking forward and trying to be creative in how we post and try and fill positions. And one piece is it does, the feedback from a number of agency folks is particularly for people who have been paraprofessionals in autism programs or working with high behavioral needs. They have left the public school paraprofessional position to become RBTs in agency work, and that happened. It's really increased during and since COVID. And so we want to potentially be able to tap into that to an extent if we need to.
so one of my thoughts was, I don't know, because there is coursework that would be tied to it if it is an RBT. So I don't know if we need to say in the job description that that is or is not something that the district would be responsible for. And then I was just curious, what is the current, we have a staff member who is a certified behavior analyst, but do we still right now have a separate part-time consultant?
Mhm.
And so you could cover the supervision requirements with either?
Mhm.
And then I saw in your update, the school psych position though is gonna stay 0.2
Mhm.
indefinitely.
Mhm.
And we're not looking to, and that's, would we need to hire a consultant in addition to that, or 0.2 is gonna cover everything that the district needs?
So 0.2 is essentially keeping us where we were the past few years, where we were contracting 0.2, but now we have 0.2 in-house. So it is, he's able to do our cognitive evaluations at the elementary school and a few other evaluations. But that vertical alignment and next steps, we're currently doing in a kind of alternative way through a DPH grant. So we're trying to be innovative and still meet the areas of need we identified. It's not with that person that we were hoping.
Is 0.2 like 1 day a week?
Mhm.
And given the costs for outsourcing that was a really good deal.
Yeah, it's
The
still
costs
good.
for the outsourcing have been climbing up at a
Mhm.
ridiculous rate. It's a crazy
At a
rate.
pace.
That was not the 6% increase. So is the committee looking for any adjustments to those job descriptions?
I think just clarifying that it was up through 6th grade.
So that'll get,
For
that'll
that
get
one.
updated.
And isn't it,
And that the entire description
it says
refers to
1 through
before.
5, but it should be K through 6?
Should be K through
Yeah.
K
6.
through 6.
And it all refers to before and after.
In essentially,
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
and essentially all the positions that we're talking about and that were then included in today's agenda are already covered. Nothing is in addition to,
No, these are not new jobs that
Nobody's adding
were,
a job.
Okay.
No added headcount. Well, there is the potential
We're
that we would
exploring, but-
add the preschool before and after coordinator, but that wouldn't be an additive to the budget because it would be paying for itself. It'd be a new revolving account cost.
okay, thank you.
all right.
So I believe we need a vote for this.
Can we batch them?
We could batch them.
I will make a motion to approve the job descriptions as listed in the agenda and amended as discussed.
Okay. All in favor?
I'll second.
Thank you for doing that before I got ahead of myself.
Coming in hot.
I'm ready to go. All in favor of approving these with the edit called out? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, 5. So with that, the committee is going to go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, or to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining and litigation of any open meeting may have to a detriment, that an open meeting would have a detrimental effect.
I make that motion.
And we will not return to regular
And
session.
I was just going to finish with no intent to return.
Love it.
So with that, we need to have a roll call vote for this. So,
Seconded.
there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Boudreaux, aye.
Engelhardt, aye.
Bench, aye.
Maloney, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
And with that, we say adieu.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.